Hey, how's it going, guys? So, as most of you have heard me talk about, there is a sports side to kettlebells. So in this quick video, I'm going to try to give you a well-rounded view of what is kettlebell sport. So, first of all, let's have a watch of me representing Ireland at the Kettlebell World Championships. So as you can see by that small clip there, World Championships in kettlebell sport and European Championships are quite a big event. And like a lot of sports, you have your judges, you have your walkouts, and that just gave you a feeling for what an international competition is like. Now, in competition, we have three major lifts that we use, okay? It is jerk, we have snatch, and those two combined are what we call biathlon. So if you're a biathlon athlete, you do jerk and then snatch, and it's a combined score that you achieve. And we'll talk a little bit about how the scoring works in a second. There's also another lift, which is called long cycle. So as you'll notice, I competed in biathlon and long cycle, which is quite unusual. It's becoming more popular today, but most athletes specialize in one or the other. So in kettlebell sport, you have biathlon and long cycle. Now, traditionally, the sets are 10 minutes. The rules have changed over the years. Currently, the rule set is you have 10 minutes from which to perform as many repetitions as possible. In the case of jerk, you cannot put the kettlebells down. Once you've picked them up, you have to, from the position in your elbows on your hips to raising the kettlebells above your head and stabilize them. There, your judge will give you your one repetition, and you try to accumulate as many repetitions as possible without making any technical faults. These are things like not holding the weight still, to your body moving, to not using a double dip jerk movement. So your score, if we finished the 10 minutes and you received 100 repetitions, that would be 100 points. Then you would have an hour usually rest, 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how big the competition is, and you would come out and perform snatch. Let's just recap the snatch technique.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
Long cycle, let's recap it.
Platform 1 we have Paul Kelly from Wexford, Platform 2 we have Mark Still from 𝐼𝐸𝐴𝐺𝐸𝐴. Platform 3.
Long cycle, it's only one lift. So you have 10 minutes from which to achieve as many repetitions as possible. You'll notice in long cycle, the difference between long cycle and jerk is that you have to bring the kettlebells and swing them down between your legs. Some athletes can actually swing them beside their legs and back to the center position before you start your next jerk repetition. So obviously this tends to be a little bit slower pace, and you're having a pull and push movement. So it's quite taxing on the body. And again, if you did 100 repetitions, your score would be 100. The athlete that scores the most amount of repetitions in their weight category, lifting the same weight, wins. Now, let's look at the brief overview of categories. So if you've seen one of the charts, you'll notice that we have your weight category, and then you have the kettlebell weights all the way through from, if it's say from a lady, you could have 8 kilogram or a junior, all the way up to 32 kilograms in biathlon and long cycle for men, and you have single arm lifts. So traditionally in kettlebell sports, it only used to be biathlon, meaning that you had a jerk and a snatch. Then in, I think, 1991 or 1992, they introduced long cycle, and that was the next lift. Women at this stage had only started competing, I think, in the late 1980s, if I remember, or maybe in the 90s, I need to check the date, and they were only permitted to do snatch. So we only traditionally used to have 4 lifts: men doing biathlon, men doing long cycle, should I say 3, or women doing snatch. Fast forward to today, you can have men doing biathlon, which is 2-arm jerk, and you have to snatch the same weight. So if you're lifting 24 kilograms in the jerk, you have to snatch a 24 kilogram kettlebell. So that's your biathlon. You have long cycle, which is 2 kettlebells, but you also have single arm long cycle, which is you can just do it with 1 arm. Men and women can do both the same. Women can also do biathlon, and they can also do long cycle, single or double. Snatch is always just single arm. And you also then have single arm jerk, which is a category in itself. So they're the main categories. You also have a kind of offshoot from the traditional kettlebell sport, which is called kettlebell marathons. So in kettlebell marathons, you have a number of different techniques where athletes may go from 30 minutes to 1 hour, continuously trying to score as many repetitions as possible. This kind of reflects the old method of kettlebells where there was no time limit. So athletes used to be able to go out, and the idea was just to get as many repetitions as possible. But what happened over time is that athletes were standing and they were doing too many repetitions for too long. Some of them were standing 2-3 hours, and then the competitions just dragged on too long, so they had to stop it. So what weights can you lift? In national competitions, you have more weights available depending on your federation, but most federations around the world have similar requirements that men can lift. Usually it's in a competition, you could lift from 12 kilogram to a 16 kilogram to a 20 kilogram to a 24 kilogram to a 28 kilogram and a 32 kilogram. And in the case of single arm, then you can go up to 40 kilograms. Women start with an 8 kilogram, and then it goes to in competition, a 12 kilogram, then it goes to a 16 kilogram, then a 20, 24 is where traditionally it stops with the major lifts, and then you can have single arm stuff, which then they can continue on to a 32. So you can see how in your national competitions, the weights are kind of spread apart, so you can progress as you progress in the sport. The charts often have, in your progression charts, sometimes you have intermediate weights, so you could have 14 kilograms, you could have 18 kilograms. These are milestones that the athlete can try to progress, because sometimes jumping up a 4 kilogram increment can be a big jump. Internationally, you have traditionally a lot less categories. You used to only be able to compete in, for men, a 24 kilogram, which was called an amateur division, and then the professional division was called 32 kilogram. The reason 32 kilogram was called professional division, because the sport that is an official sport of the country, like Russia, Lithuania, Latvia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, those athletes in the professional categories in their country, they win prizes and money. So when you're doing a competition and there's money to be made also. Maybe not a lot of money, but you can be paid, and you are funded also by your government then to compete and represent. So it would be the professional category. So when an athlete, for instance, in Ireland, once I was competing in the 32 kilogram, it would be seen as a professional category, even though in Ireland, you were not paid. So strictly speaking, it isn't professional because you're not being paid. But when you go internationally, and again, we still have to self-fund. So in Ireland, we would still term it amateur. You're competing at a professional level because you're competing with athletes that are being paid to compete. Again, not all countries are like this, but it's still seen as the professional category in sports. So that gives you a rundown of kettlebell sport. Let's have a quick look at the rules. The rules are simple. Once you pick up the kettlebell, you can't put it down. For jerk technique, the weights have to go in one movement up and hold for what they call fixation. So usually it's about 1 second to 2 seconds where the body's dead still and then come down. If you make 4 in a row where you're not sticking to the rules, so you're not fixating the weight, you're not getting all the way up, you're lifting the weights to your shoulders, so you're adjusting the weights too much, then you're penalized and a no lift. If you do 4 in a row, you are disqualified or your set is cancelled. Your score still counts, but you can no longer complete the set. If you do 8 of these little misdemeanors during your set, total set, your set is also stopped and your score still counts, but you can no longer continue. If you break some of the major rules, which are speaking on the platform, profanity, spitting, arguing with the judge, your set is terminated and your score does not count. Something like finishing the set and throwing your weights down, showing bad sportsmanship, your set is terminated, meaning your score will not go through to the scoreboard. So that's the rules. In Snatch, the weight goes from the head, above your head, all the way down between your legs and up in one unimpeded movement. So it's not allowed to take a pit stop on the way, okay? And you can only change hands once. In the case of all one-arm lifts, you can only change hands once. When you're doing a one-arm lift, the other hand is not allowed to aid the lift whatsoever. So if you touched your arm, the kettlebell, your leg, any part of your body where you aided yourself, so if I were in the case of Snatch, if I used my non-working arm and placed it on my thigh, your set would be stopped straight away, okay? So that would be something that you would not be allowed to be able to do because it would be seen as aiding the lift. So guys, I hope that gives you an overview of the basic fundamental idea of what the rules set are. Of course, if you have any questions, please ask me, and in further videos I can always go into a little bit more detail, because like any sport, there's a lot of rule sets, and it's important if someone is doing a sport to know the rule sets thoroughly, because often it's not the case of simply who is the best athlete, but is who is able to play the rule set the best. Like I'll leave with my coach's advice to me: Mark, it doesn't matter how many times you can lift the weight above your head, it's how many times you can lift it above your head and have the judge count those repetitions. And that summed up the sport.